My question is, what are the things that in the modern society are standing in the way of sleep? We've touched on some of them loosely, but some of the like big obvious things, the things that you would suggest doing, very actionable things we could do straight away to improve our chances of having that healthy, deep sleep that we need to be optimal in every regard of our health and performance.
There's probably, I think, 5 standard tips, what we call sort of sleep hygiene, that you can do, and then I'll come on to maybe just some unconventional tips that we've sort of touched on, and we've spoken about many of these. The first thing I would recommend people to do, and this is why when some people say, oh, what about this new sleep supplement, or it's 40 quid for this bottle of these new sleep natural medications, I'm going to give it a try. I would say try these tried and true things first before you spend your money on supplements. The first thing is regularity. Go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time, no matter whether it's the weekday or the weekend. Your brain expects regularity. It thrives best under conditions of regularity. When you give it regularity, you can improve the quantity and the quantity of your sleep. The second thing is get some darkness at night. As I said, we don't get enough darkness in the modern world. And so the trick I would offer, and I don't use it, I don't like the word hack, but the sort of suggestion would be, in the last hour before bed, try this experiment for everyone listening for the next week. Dim down half of the lights, or switch off half of the lights, or even 3/4 of the lights in your home in the last hour before bed.
All of the lights in every room?
In all of the rooms. Switch off almost all of the light. Now, I'm not suggesting be unsafe and walk around in the darkness in the last hour. That's not what I want to say. Just dim down, switch off half of the lights. You will be surprised at how sleepy that darkness will make you feel. And it's also an incredible behavioral trigger to signal to your brain that it is time for sleep, that darkness is around me. That's the second tip, is darkness. The third tip is temperature. Most people sleep in an ambient bedroom temperature that is too high. And you need to aim for a bedroom temperature of about 18.5 degrees Celsius, around about 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm probably butchering the mathematics there on that. But you need to get cool. Now, you can wear thick socks, you can have a hot water bottle, that's fine. But the ambient needs to be cold, because you need to drop your core body temperature and your brain temperature by about 1 degree Celsius to fall asleep and stay asleep. And it's the reason that you will always find it easier to fall asleep in a room that's too cold than too hot. So make your bedroom cold, make it dark like a cave. The fourth question would be sort of fourth suggestion would be walk it out. And we've spoken about this, the 30-minute rule, get up, do something different, or meditate. Don't lie in bed awake for too long. Then the final 2 things we've spoken about caffeine. We haven't spoken about alcohol, but let me just say, as the kind of headline of it, alcohol is not a sleep aid. Many people use it as a sleep aid. It is not your friend. Alcohol, again, is a sedative, so it knocks you out. The second is that it fragments your sleep. So you wake up, your sleep is littered with all of these small awakenings. Most of them you don't remember because they're too brief, but it makes for miserable, lousy quality sleep. And the final thing is that alcohol is very good at blocking your REM sleep or your dream sleep, which we know is critical for many other functions as well. So it turns out that the blue light from screens does have an impact on sleep. So there's a great study done by Harvard Medical School by some colleagues there, and they showed that reading for an hour on an iPad just before bed, relative to just reading a book in dim light, firstly, it delayed the time with which people fell asleep, so it took them a lot longer to fall asleep. Second, it reduced the total amount of sleep that they had. Third, it decreased a sleep-related hormone called melatonin. It delayed the release of that melatonin, and it reduced the amount of melatonin. And finally, it reduced the amount of rapid eye movement sleep. So it had
significantly. The melatonin point, how significantly?
So it delayed the release by about somewhere between 90 minutes to 2 hours across the individuals. So in other words, your brain wasn't. So what melatonin does, it's called the hormone of darkness, or the vampire hormone, just because because it makes you want to bite into people's necks, because it signals to your brain that it's nighttime, that it's darkness. And so your brain needs the signal of melatonin for it to understand when is it dark. In other words, it needs to understand by way of melatonin when it is time to fall asleep. And when you're bathed in electric light at night, and especially when you're getting blue light from these devices, your brain is fooled into thinking it's still daytime. And when there is light emitting through your retina, coming into your brain, it signals to a part of your brain to hit the brakes on melatonin, and your brain will not release melatonin. So what was happening with this iPad reading is that you were artificially telling the brain it's still daytime, and the brakes on melatonin was still shut on. And so melatonin was not starting to be released until much later. And what was also interesting about that study, by the way, is that when they stopped the iPad reading, the sleep disrupted pattern continued for several days later. In other words, it was almost like a drug, that it had a washout period, that was a blast radius to it. Now, there's been some great work by a wonderful sleep scientist in Australia, Michael Gradazar, and he has added to this story, and he said it's not just the blue light. These devices, the principal function of these devices is that they are attention capture devices. Just like you said, I'm just going to have a wee little TikTok before bed. They are in the attention economy, and all they care about is capturing your attention for a currency, and they make a lot of money from it. What that attention does is that it stimulates your brain, and when your brain is stimulated, it's very difficult for you to fall asleep, and it creates what we call sleep procrastination, where you're lying in bed and you could be perfectly sleepy and you could fall asleep right now. But then you sort of check social media and you think, oh, I'll just shoot that last email. Oh, and then I'll order that last thing on sort of, Amazon. And then you get a text back from your friend and you start texting them. And then you look up and it's now an hour later and you're an hour deficient on sleep. So it's the activation of your cerebral cortex by these devices that is perhaps the more harmful aspect of them regarding your sleep.